Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Ondo Finance. Now, Ondo Finance is essentially able to get best-in-class yields for assets like ETH, and it does so because it allows users to pool their funds together and split out liquidity into two sides. Now, that may sound confusing at first, but I promise we will explain it. And I also wanted to let you guys know that Ondo has not yet released its token. It's worth reasoning that there could be an airdrop in the future. So we're on Ondo's main page, and you can see right now they're taking subscriptions for one pool, and that is an ETH and YGG token pair. And if we click more info here, I can show you what that actually means. So here we're looking at the ETH YGG tranche, and you can see that you can actually single-sided deposit into this vault. So you can choose to deposit ETH and get a 25% fixed APY, or deposit the YGG token and get a variable APY that's estimated to be 413%. So if you're like me, you're always searching for the highest yield on ETH that's safe and sustainable, and right now this is pretty much it. So how do these pools actually work and pair liquidity? Well, the first step in the process is Ondo actually has a subscription requests period, which lasts a few days. Now, during that period, users can deposit either side of these assets, but Ondo has to make sure that they balance out the assets in the end. So usually the more popular assets will be a bit oversubscribed, and when this happens, Ondo actually just returns those funds back to the user and they don't get accepted into the pool. We can actually visualize that here. So you can see looks like about $4 million of requests for ETH for this pool. But for the YGG pool, there's only $3.4 million worth of requests. So all of that excess ETH will get returned back because Ondo has to make sure that they get 50-50 of each asset. The reason being is Ondo is creating standard V2 style AMM liquidity pools, so they need to have a 1-to-1 liquidity ratio. I have noticed that generally the fixed yield products are going to be more popular, and people really want to get a yield on ETH and stablecoins and less so on YGG just because it's a much riskier speculative asset. So generally the ETH or stablecoin yields are going to be more oversubscribed. Now, this doesn't tend to be a problem if you're one of the earlier deposits, so in just a minute I'll show you how to get notified when they're taking new subscription requests for new pools. So I'm now on the markets tab, and you can see here are all the active vaults going right now. So you can't deposit into them, but you can track their progress if you've already deposited. But I think it's actually worth going to the expired tab just to see how historically Ondo has performed. So you can see Ondo initially launched with Uniswap pools, but migrated to SushiSwap just because there's often incentives there which boost the yield as well. And you can see the last 4 or so pools had really strong APYs. Now, worth noting that these are actually APYs, not APRs, as it says there, because Ondo is going to be compounding your LP positions for you. So just looking at the last few here, you can see the ETH APYs range between 35 and 50%, which again is of course best in class for a safe yield for ETH. And then even the yields for ALCX or Alchemex's governance token are quite high here. So if you're just sitting on Alchemex and you want to continue to hold it, something like this is probably a great option for you. Now, it is worth noting that in some cases, Ondo Finance actually stakes the LP tokens for you. So in the ETH Alchemex example, they're actually staking with Alchemex, and that's part of the reason they're able to achieve such a high APY. So generally, these yields do not come from swap fees alone, but they are auto-compounded for you, so you're just compounding the initial position. In this case, ALCX rewards would be compounded for ETH and ALCX, and this is just another efficiency for the end user because you're of course saving on gas and not having to auto-compound yourself. Now, one thing to cover is how impermanent loss is handled in this situation. So in this case, the impermanent loss risk is actually pushed over to the variable yield position, so the fixed yield depositor does not hold impermanent loss risk. Now, the fixed yield depositor in this case is the senior tranche. What that means is that the fixed yield position gets all of the yield initially so that it hits that hurdle rate, which was set by Ondo. In this case, it was 30% or 25% or 20%, and all of the yield after that accrues to the variable yield token. What that means is you're essentially pushing off that impermanent loss risk, so you're not facing impermanent loss if you deposit single-sided for the fixed yield position. Now, the variable yield position is the junior tranche, so they're taking on that impermanent loss risk, but you can see they're getting compensated for it with a high APY. Now, of course, the variable yield APY is variable, so they're definitely taking on risk there if you're choosing to deposit to the variable yield side. Now, I know there are going to be a ton of questions about impermanent loss in the comments, which I will try to get to, but just know that it's mitigated with the fixed yield position, and the variable yield position takes on that IL risk. Now, it's worth noting the historical vaults had a pretty low total value locked, and that was partially because Ondo actually capped deposits for these vaults. Now back on this upcoming page here, I believe this YGG vault is actually the first uncapped vault, so it's basically taking as much money as it can, but keep in mind it does have to balance out the ETH YGG token pairs. Now I know this concept of depositing into these vaults, which essentially split out LP tokens, can be a bit confusing, so I will actually link the FAQ below. It's very helpful, pretty easy to read, and I think it will answer pretty much all of your questions. I also wanted to show you they have 3 audits now from QuantStamp, PeckShield, and Certec. And in addition to that, I actually had a call with the founder. He's a very nice person, and I think there's almost 0% chance of a team rug here. So of course, security exploits do happen, but you can be a bit confident that they have 3 audits. Now, as I mentioned, Ondo has not yet launched a token, so this is a potential candidate for an airdrop, which is very exciting. I think this is pretty much the best of both worlds because in this example, you're able to get the highest yield on ETH and potentially get an airdrop. And there is one thing I wanted to show you in their docs that in some ways hints at that. If we scroll down, we can see there is a governance role here in the developers tab, and you can see that there is a DAO governance contract. Now, of course, it is pretty much impossible to have a DAO without a token, so to me, this signals that it's very likely. I also think the protocol would just naturally benefit from a token because right now, all of the decision making is done by the team, so when they're deciding whether to pick a new vault to open up subscription requests for, that's done internally. I do think that process would be a bit better if it was decentralized and the community could pick what they want to create vaults for. So as I mentioned, you probably want to be early, especially if you want the ETH side of the vaults or the fixed side. And the simple thing here is to follow the Ondo Finance Twitter account and put alerts on, which you can see I've done myself. Whenever Ondo is about to release a new vault, they always tweet out a warning, and you can see here that they announced that the vault's about to go live in 12 minutes. So if you had alerts on, you could have been one of the first, and I expect that to continue going forward. So that's all I have on Ondo Finance. I think I showed you that these are really best-in-class yields for whichever token you choose to deposit on. So I don't really know another place where you can get a safe 30% yield on ETH, and I think it's worth depositing just on the understanding that you might get an airdrop in the future. Now, if you have any questions, please check out the Discord. That's generally a great resource, and the community is happy to help you there. Now, I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, and with that said, I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.